GoForThe2.com in with the Week 5 college football predictions. Lackluster week number 4, looking to get back on track this coming Friday and Saturday night. For me, it does start on Friday night. Classic Big Ten battle, Nebraska, Illinois. Nebraska coming off a lackluster 10-point win over Rutgers in Memorial Stadium. Did not look good offensively or defensively in that matchup. On the flip side, Illinois coming out of a bye week, an extra week of preparation for this battle. Since 2011, Nebraska is 3-1 over Illinois and have won those games by 11 points per game. You're talking about an Illinois team that is struggling to stretch teams vertically, only passing for 179 yards through the air. I think that's the difference heading into this ball game. I still give the edge on the offensive and defensive lines to Nebraska in this ball game. Tanner Lee has not looked good. I understand that. 7 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. But you're talking about a Nebraska offense that's rushing for 154 yards on the ground. Illinois' defense entering this matchup is allowing 184 rushing yards to opposing offenses, and more importantly, allowing 50% on third down conversions to opposing offenses. I think that's the difference going up against Tanner Lee and a more complete offense in Nebraska. I think Nebraska's speed can exploit Illinois' secondary in this ballgame. You look at Nebraska defensively, still solid in run support, only giving up 114 rushing yards on the ground, and more importantly, holding opposing offenses to 38% on third down conversions. I give the edge to Mike Riley in this matchup. He is on the hot seat. Nebraska got through the game last week after their loss at home to Northern Illinois. They will not take Illinois lightly, and I think they get a convincing 20-point win in Champaign over Lovie Smith. I'm not sold on the physicality of this team overall. And Nebraska, still very good in run support. To me, that's the difference. They can make Illinois' offense one-dimensional, don't have a lot of playmakers to take the top off the defense, and Nebraska should win this ball game convincingly by 20 points or more, 41-21. I also do not like Lovie Smith as head coach. Pick this team to go 3-9 in the Big Ten this year. I'm not backing down. Nebraska wins this ball game by 20 points. Another intriguing battle is Colorado, UCLA. I was wrong on Colorado last week. Lost that matchup 37-10 over Washington. It was 17-10 in the third quarter before Steven Montez threw a pick six that blew that ball game wide open. But you're looking at this ball game right now against UCLA. Since 2012, UCLA is 4-1 over Colorado and have won those games by 14.2 points per game. Colorado, though, did get the victory last year in Boulder, 20-10. You look at UCLA coming off a disappointing 58-34 loss to Stanford. That game was tied 13 apiece in the second quarter before Stanford ran away with that matchup in the second half of that ballgame. UCLA allowed 405 rushing yards to Stanford. Entering this ballgame, UCLA is allowing 305 rushing yards to opposing offenses. They're -5 in turnover margin and are allowing 43 points per game heading into this ballgame. I give the edge in terms of a physicality to Colorado. I think they're able to run the football with Philip Lindsay. They're averaging 141 rushing yards on the ground, still passing for 272 yards through the air, and have playmakers of Bryce Bobo, Shea Fields, and Devin Ross to attack that UCLA defense vertically. I think this is the more complete team. I know Colorado's coming off a loss and now goes on the road to UCLA. I don't care. I think they'll be determined, and I give the edge in terms of a physicality to the Buffaloes. You look at UCLA overall now, they're starting to wear down at the point of attack. They don't even want to tackle and run support going up against a blue-collar team in Colorado. And more importantly, Colorado third down defense still legit, holding opposing offenses to 29% on third down conversions. As an offense overall, they're converting 43%. That's the difference. I think it's a high-scoring game, but Colorado gets a 41-31 victory in the Rose Bowl over Josh Rosen. This team is 500 now, and I think they slipped to 2-3 on the year. Another intriguing battle is Baylor, Kansas State. Baylor's won 4 of the last 5 now and has dominated over the last 5 years, but they did lose that ball game last year in Waco to Kansas State. It was Zach Smith's first start as a quarterback in Waco. He played well in the first half, did not play well after halftime. Kansas State was able to wear down the front seven of Baylor in that matchup. But more importantly, I look at this game overall. I look at Baylor's effort against Oklahoma, their ability to stretch that Sooner secondary vertically. Zach Smith completed 66% of his passes, 463 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's the way you have to beat Kansas State, is you have to attack their secondary vertically. If you could force them out of their game plan and force them to match you score for score, Kansas State and Jesse Ertz is just a one-dimensional offense. I think that's the difference. I like Zach Smith as the quarterback of this team. Last week, they played toe-to-toe with the top team, number 3 in the country, in Baker Mayfield and Oklahoma. This is a conference game. I know they're 0-4, but they're playing well under Matt Rule, and I think speed is a difference in this matchup. I'm not sold on Kansas State entering this year. I picked them at 5-7 overall. They won 9 games last year against 8 FBS opponents with a combined overall record of 39-60. Not sold on the speed perspective of Kansas State. Their wide receivers, Zuber, Heath, and Pringle, I think they're a methodical offense, and it's all predicated off of running the football. Baylor gets the victory, and I think they win this ball game by 13 points or more. I'm calling for the 44-30 victory over Kansas State. I think they dominate Bill Snyder, even though Kansas State coming out of a bye week. I like the speed of Baylor in this matchup. They get a 14-point win over Kansas State on the road. Another intriguing battle is Florida and Vanderbilt. Dead wrong on Vanderbilt. They got blown out by Alabama 59-0. They allowed 496 rushing yards to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Kyle Shermer threw a couple of picks, but more importantly, you're talking about a Vanderbilt offense that was held to 1 of 10 on third down conversions. They've now had back-to-back games in where they allowed 201 rushing yards to Kansas State, now 496 to Alabama. They got beat up on the offense and defensive lines, now have to go on the road to face Florida. Since 2012, Florida has won 4 of the last 5 over Vanderbilt by 11 points per game. The last 2 have only been decided by a total of 9 points, or 4.5 points per game. But I give the edge to Florida and new starting quarterback Luke Del Rio. You're talking about a Florida team that squeaked past Kentucky 31 straight games, 28-27. They found a way to get it done. Luke Del Rio came off the bench. He completed 9 of 14 passes, 74 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. He's been named the starter. But more importantly, it was the rushing offense of Florida. They broke out last week for 186 rushing yards on the ground, 2 rushing touchdowns. Their first 2 rushing touchdowns since back in 2016 that held a span of 9 total games. Their first 2 rushing touchdowns came last week against Kentucky, and that was a Kentucky defense that was allowing 57 rushing yards heading into that ball game. They were a solid front seven that held Ito Smith and Southern Miss in check to 54 rushing yards week 1. They held Rico Dowdle and South Carolina in check, 55 rushing yards the following week. So that's a solid effort by Florida. They now come back home to the Swamp. They've won 2 close games against SEC opponents, Tennessee on a last-second Hail Mary, and Vanderbilt. I think they get healthy this week in a big, big way. I still give the edge of Florida's secondary going up against Kyle Shermer. Yes, I know I said that Vanderbilt did have a more explosive offense, but they got worn out by Alabama. Now have to face a very physical defense in Florida on the road. I think Florida wins this ball game convincingly. I think it's high scoring as well. Look for Luke Del Rio to stretch that defense vertically. Florida wins a 41-21 victory over the Commodores this coming Saturday. Another intriguing battle is Georgia Tech, North Carolina. Georgia Tech dominated Pittsburgh. North Carolina held a 17-13 lead over Duke before giving up 2 late touchdowns to lose that ball game 27-17. They now go on the road to face Georgia Tech. They've won 3 of the last 5 and won that ball game last year by a 28-point margin over the Yellow Jackets. But this is a different Georgia Tech team. Heading into this ball game, Georgia Tech is rushing for 393 rushing yards on the ground, and they're converting 54% of their third down conversions. You're talking about a North Carolina defense that is allowing close to 178 rushing yards per game. They can't stop the run, number one, and are a one-dimensional offense stretching teams vertically. But you look at Georgia Tech's defense. This is a top-ranked defense entering this ballgame. Georgia Tech is holding opposing offenses to 264 total yards per game, holding opposing offenses to 164 passing yards per game and only 100 rushing yards per game. And more importantly, very, very solid in third down conversion defense, holding opposing offenses to 26% of their third down conversions. That's the difference for me. I think Georgia Tech is a complete team. I think they can control the time of possession, score first, and wear down North Carolina in this matchup, keep North Carolina's offense on the sidelines. And where is the mindset of North Carolina now? They lost a tough ball game to arch rival Duke. They are reeling right now, have not played well. Their third loss of the year. They now go on the road. I like the way Georgia Tech is playing. I picked them to win their side of the Coastal. I'm not backing down now. I think Georgia Tech gets a convincing 24-point win over North Carolina in this ball game. Another intriguing battle, Miami of Ohio, Notre Dame. Notre Dame coming off back-to-back road wins over Boston College and Michigan State. You look at Brandon Wimbush, he's playing very well in the system. The speed of Notre Dame really took over in that matchup against the Spartans on the road. They now come back home. They're not going to be up for this ball game of a MAC opponent, Miami of Ohio. This is a Miami of Ohio team that's passing for 220 yards through the air. They have a very solid quarterback in Gus Ragland, 8 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. But more importantly, Miami of Ohio's defense overall, very solid. They're holding opposing offenses to 19 points per game. Very solid in run support, giving up 118 yards on the ground per game and only 192 passing yards per game. I think this is a letdown for Notre Dame. Notre Dame wins, but it's a lot closer than people think. Notre Dame ekes past Miami of Ohio for a 14-point win in South Bend. Look for an emotional letdown by Brandon Wimbush and the Fighting Irish this coming weekend. Notre Dame wins by 14 points in this ballgame. Final game is Mississippi State and Auburn. Mississippi State got dominated by Georgia. I was all over the Bulldogs in one of my 2 wins last week. I thought Georgia held a significant offense and defensive line advantage over Nick Fitzgerald and the Mississippi State Bulldogs. Mississippi State's won 3 of the last 5. They got dominated at home last year in Starkville, but I think this is a different team with Nick Fitzgerald in terms of they're playing a lot better in run support, only holding opposing offenses to 126 rushing yards on the ground and holding opposing offenses to 129 passing yards through the air. I'm not sold on Jarrett Stidham overall. I know Kerryon Johnson came back, rushed for 5 touchdowns on the ground. They dominated Missouri. I was dead wrong on Missouri as being a good team in the SEC East. Won that matchup 51-14. They've now put together back-to-back wins over Missouri and Mercer. I'm not sold on the consistency of Auburn being an elite team. I look at the body of work by Mississippi State. They had 3 tough games, Louisiana Tech, LSU, and Georgia. Now this is a difficult ball game going on the road in the Plains. It's an SEC West game. I think Mississippi State gets it done. I'm just not sold on Auburn and Gus Malzahn. I like Nick Fitzgerald. I think this is a perfect spot for them. They get the upset win, 23-20 over Auburn. I think they'll be in this game from start to finish. Look for Donald Gray to break out. Look for the front 7 of Mississippi State to contain Jarrett Stidham, especially on third down defense and third down conversions. I think that's where Dan Mullen's defense steps up. Nick Fitzgerald will be able to make enough plays to put his offense in a position to score points. Miss State gets the upset win, 23-20 over Auburn. Stay with me each and every Saturday. You can follow the radio show this coming Saturday, 6 to 9 Pacific. That's a.m., 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific, Fantasy Sports Radio, 9 to 12 Eastern, 9 a.m., 12 p.m. Eastern, Fantasy Sports Radio Network. Or you could go to Dish Television Network, Channel 266, or Fantasy Sports Television in the Tri-State and Toronto area, Optimum, Cox Cable. Check it out. College football today. Love talking about college football. See you next week. Good luck on the games.